Hello everyone, welcome to another Reaper Blog video. Today I'm interviewing Marc Straight. We've done an interview before, but this time we're going to focus on electronic music composition, working on his song I Am Heaven, how he takes it from a piano and chords-based composition and turns it into a full electronic music piece. We're going to talk about some of the Reaper features he uses to help his workflow, things that he uses to get 7 albums worth of material done this year, and I'm sure we'll cover a lot of other things throughout this. Welcome, Marc.
Hey.
Good to have you here again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
All right, so let's start off with this simple project idea that you had, or maybe you want to give us some background on this song to begin with.
This is the first version of the song I Am Heaven that is reflective of the name of the album that it's for. Originally, the album was very, very relaxed and kind of more ambient focused and less intensive. And over the course of 2 years, as I was making this album, it has drastically changed from being very chill, very atmospheric, slower album, and it's drastically changed into something like much bigger and much more dynamic. Going through that process, this song in particular changed 3 different times. Well, it changed 2 other times. I wrote it then, and there was 2 other versions that were made. It kept going through these wild changes just based off of the intent of the album, while the core reasoning for this song stayed the same.
What was the inspiration for this song? What was the idea in your head?
Yeah, so the song, I kind of wanted it to be like reflective of what the entire like mission statement of the album is. At no point in your life should you have like dead air. So like everything in your life could eventually be a memory, and it should be a memory. So like whenever you have moments in your life, like they should all be something that you're interested in cherishing. Otherwise, there's kind of no point in having those moments. And so it's like kind of me trying to help myself particularly understand to appreciate things more, because like you were saying, I've made a lot of albums this year and I don't think I really appreciated my own life enough because I was too busy making music. And it's like at the end of it, I was like, I'm making this entire album about something that I'm not even doing. So it was a big wake up call to me to like change some things about myself and also hopefully make some people's lives better.
So you came at this through a very introspective starting point. Let's hear a little bit of this original song idea you have.
So initially, it started out as really it's just piano with some strings and the initial synth sounds, along with some drums that come in later. And these are all different sections or instruments from different songs on the album that I brought together to kind of form this one idea. As the track kind of stood the test of time, it didn't stay with the direction that the rest of the album had. So I changed it over to just a piano version after I had listened to a piano version of a song that I had originally written as like a synthwave-ish track. And then I re-recorded just recently for the B-sides of the album. So we can go ahead and play through with this.
So it's quite a big difference there, really changes the feel.
Yeah. So that one I liked a whole lot more than the original as far as it fitting with the style of the song. And then I went through and I was thinking like, well, I don't want this to be the only piano solo song on the main album. So I was working on the album and I was really frustrated because I just couldn't get anything going that day. So I decided to take a nap. And while I was getting ready to like fall asleep, I was kind of in a half awake, half dream state. And
Hmm.
I kept thinking about the chords that were in this song. And then something, I don't know how this happens, but it happened twice in this album where I just started hearing a different version of the song in my head. And I pretty much just kept focusing on it while in that half awake, half asleep state to just kind of like ride out as much as I could of the idea and hopefully remember it when I wake up. And that's actually what I did and how the next and final version of the song was made. It was just hearing what I had in my dream and doing everything I could to bring that into the real world to some degree.
It's really weird how that can happen sometimes with not even really trying to come up with an idea for something, or maybe something that you're almost subconsciously struggling with, and then you just dream and it becomes real,
Yeah,
sort of thing.
I think it has a lot to do with your subconscious has better answers to like your own impulses than you do. A lot of composition is realistically like translating your head into a physical form because we all have music that we hear in our head that we write in our head. If you're a composer, then it just happens all the time. At least it is for me. And so we're essentially just translators of our own brain, but for music. That's like the truest form for me with this sort of thing. And that's how everything developed with the song.
So this song really changed. It started out with less than 12 tracks, then it went down to 2 tracks, and now it looks like about 75 tracks. The arrangement is much more full. Got
Yeah, for sure.
percussion, we got loads of synth layers, piano still, but you know, couldn't possibly change more.
It got kind of out of hand. I built a new computer during the process of making the album. And one of the reasons why I got a new computer was because I really focus on texture layering. And whenever I do a lot of that, we have like you run into a problem of you have a lot of tracks that are going on. And if your computer can't perform under those circumstances, then you struggle a lot. I got the new computer, and this was one of the last tracks that were made for the album.
It's so important to have the computer just not get in the way of your
Yeah.
creativity. So if you want to add in 10 more
Hmm.
synth layers, Reaper and your computer should be able to handle that, so that you're not constantly like bouncing tracks or, working in sub projects or anything that takes time and focus away from just continuing through the song, create a flow.
There's a song on the album called Wonder. That song had three different versions. The second version of it was like 100% CPU usage the entire time, to the point where I had to export the piano, the percussion, and I think like 10 other layers. I would have them in a different project, export those out, and I'd have the wave files in the actual like in progress project. So as I would finish different layers, I would render those stems out to kind of like keep working on them without my PC just completely dying.
So that was kind of out of necessity, but is that something that you like to do just to commit to different sounds?
It let me make sure that they had intent behind every part because whenever you're limited to like what if this is the thing that actually like ends my computer's ability to function by just like, is this synth layer worth it?
Yeah.
Whenever you're asking those type of questions, then like the ability to experiment isn't as much there, but the focus is way higher, and that's kind of where I wanted to be at that time because I already had I think 60 layers on it, and that's what started the bottleneck of like, hey, we're hitting 100%. Good luck rendering this.
Yeah, I've definitely run into the thing where I'm looking at my effects list and I'm like, this is gonna crash if I add this plugin. I'm sure of it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and then you lose a good idea.
yeah. That's what I was like constantly battling with, and then eventually, whenever I was working on the rest of the album after I did the upgrade, I was like, okay, perfect. I don't have CPU limitation. Let's get weird.
Yeah.
And and unfortunately, 80 tracks later, we have this song.
All right, so let's listen to a little bit of this and see how it changed, at least in the beginning of the track. A lot of texture there. There's a lot of thick pad sounds there, a lot of little percussive sounds. I think there was like a guitar sound in there,
Yeah,
kind of like a tapped guitar. That was really
yeah.
cool.
There's a little finger picking guitar, so it's in here. So it is elegant picking on Atmosphere, which is a factory preset, by the way. Just
Okay.
just for anyone that has Atmosphere 2, that's what I was using. I added that in just because it fit too well with like the gentleness of the beginning, and
Hmm.
a lot of the song ties in with a lot of electronic songs, and the purpose is to drive the listener toward the intense moments, the big peak moments, and in the valleys of the song, communicate like relief, but also anticipation simultaneously. And this song kind is really reflective, really introspective. At least for me, I wanted to have that feeling going on of everything of the song is leading up to this big moment. Whenever I say big moment, it's like the drop of the song, but it's realistically like I wanted to have music that connected with people's lives. And like, you know how whenever we were like younger, we had like moments that we thought were really important, but in hindsight, they were only important specifically to us.
Like all of high school.
Yeah, like I remember whenever I was like I wrote poetry as a teenager, to no one's surprise, and I was like really angry to find out that my computer at the time what got fried, and I just lost all my poetry. That's the only thing that mattered to me was like not anything else that was on there. Like I wanted to write more poems, and in hindsight, I was like, that's the least amount of problems I could have, but that was really important to me, and
Hmm.
I kind of wanted to like capture that sort of feeling, like it's a small event, but it's huge for that individual, and the entire album's thematics are essentially that, just small moments in a person's life that mean a large amount specifically to them.
So dynamically, there's a lot going on there. It's building, it's dropping down,
Mhm.
it's getting thicker, and then it falls away to almost nothing, and then but we know that there's a big drop coming.
Yeah.
There's a one synth in there that reminds me a lot of almost like violins in the way that they're played.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool.
A lot of the layers in there, I really focused heavily more so on texture of the sounds than I did of making each section and subsection of this song really like dynamically changing, because all of them are just a driving force to this big moment. It's kind of like the humming pattern that you have inside of your head that you can't let go of, and eventually that humming pattern could be associated with something that's going like your day. Whenever you think about like that particular rhythm, you think about what happened whenever you had it stuck in your head. At least that happens to me sometimes.
Let's check out some of the layers here.
Yeah.
Particularly, there's bar 52 or so. There's a big stack of synths that come in there.
Yeah, this is the part of the drop that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So 50 comes in with, I should probably have renamed that. Um, so that was a bass sub that you're hearing, and I'll play that real quick. Nice low bass sub that's coming in, and that is paired. I really should have renamed these before we had the recording.
Oh, well.
So then this next one is huge drop chords. Which are pretty standard chords. And then we have more of the layers of the drop that are coming into play just continuously. And we also have this. That's kind of like giving the rising intensity. Oh, something's going to happen because this is building up sort of feel. And that's being controlled by everything up here with the additional little changes that are happening over time.
This isn't the full mix. There's another version. This is just still the songwriting process. There is a little bit of EQ, some automation and stuff like that, but you don't worry about getting it perfect sounding in the actual writing process.
No, it's mainly just like it's intent. Like the biggest thing about it is like whenever I write, especially for electronic music, just the minor things are what matter most. So if this came in at 100% intensity right at the gate, I don't give a shit how good it sounds. If it's overpowering, then it loses impact.
Yeah.
So it was like I wanted to have it automated to where it just automatically flows up, and if it's too little, too much, I can deal with that later. I can deal with that during the mixing process.
But certain things are important, like the EQ automation there.
Yeah.
It would not build without that.
Yeah, exactly. I needed that automation in order to be able to communicate this entire section. So, like, so if this came in just normal, so if it came in as normal, it would sound like this. And that's just like too much force for all the quiet build that's been happening, the slower build that's happening. So
Yeah.
the automation is completely necessary just from a songwriting standpoint because you get the intent. Because what I'm writing, like the entire song or the entire album took place over the course of 2 years. Like in the final song of the album, I wrote it, I think like I would say a year ago, and I forgot to write drums in it. I wrote a note in Reaper like find better drums. Like that was a note that I left myself because I apparently like giving myself in the future way more work. Um, but I wrote as a note in there like, "Hey, future Mark, sorry, but I didn't put drums in this." And so like you don't know your intent as time goes on. Like you're going to forget. So it's like having these automation curves and just these small nuances kind of communicates the intent with you over time as a way to like preserve what you were trying to achieve.
Yeah, you can always refine it later, but
Yeah,
not having in that automation there, you're more likely just to mute or delete that synth entirely if it just you come to the mix and it doesn't work.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. I think we can move on to the drop section.
Mm-hmm.
One of the interesting things about this section is there's those huge chords that come in, but when they're not there, there's still quietly, some of the synths are still kind of sustaining that note. And so if we listen to that without the drums, there's never complete silence between the chords.
Yeah, for those sections, for especially for the drop, I wanted to have like these big chords, but moments of reflection in between the chords. So you have time to kind of digest what's happening because of the drastic change that's going on. And there are a few songs on the album itself that kind of fly in the face of that intent. But especially for this song, everything is very introspective. So I wanted time to kind of like digest what you're hearing. So I don't want there to be complete silence because obviously that's boring. But whenever you have like the breath of the synth kind of like continuing on while a couple of other smaller synths play, like this right here. So you hear that while the rest of the synths are kind of like on the come down, you're kind of always hearing something, but the dynamics are way different.
Big dramatic differences in a short section.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about keeping a familiar feel between the different sections, even though it's changing so much.
Mm-hmm.
I see that some of the instruments are reused between the previous section right before the drop, like the glassy synth and Scooby Doo Doo, Scoopy Doopy Doo. Your names are great. So is there a strategy for that? How you reuse different sounds, but maybe change the way that they're played?
Yeah. A lot of them are like he protect. There's three of them. He snack, he nap. A lot of them start out as the same synth that gets micro changed, or then after I'm going through them, I'll find a synth that fits better, but within the same limitations as the effects that I put on it.
There's one example you showed me the other day, and I can't remember which track it was, where like one time it was playing chord, the other time it was playing a melody in a
Oh,
different section.
yeah. So then that changes over to
So you're using those as a way to get familiar sounds in a completely new way. By changing the way that it's played, it adds motion or makes it feel a bit faster in the later part of the song. But it's a familiar sound. It's the same chords. I think that's an effective use. Even though you have 100 different layers of synths,
Yeah.
some of them are reused in different ways, and I think that's effective in multiple ways.
Yeah. So like the high pluck, it will sound drastically different because it's kind of accenting the guitar parts. So it doesn't even sound like a pluck.
It's totally different.
Yeah. So that's another big drastic change. And so having these things kind of like you're keeping familiarity amongst essentially chaos. Most people are going to look at this project and just be like, what is happening? And I completely understand.
I've known you long enough that I can ignore all of the things that I think are crazy, but like no file names, no track names, no colors.
Oh yeah.
If it works, then stick with it. Like you get a lot more music out there than I do, so maybe there's something to learn in that. Don't worry about this stuff that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, whenever I'm mixing, I don't give a shit about like the file names when I'm mixing. I'm listening. I'm not reading. At no point am I like, whenever I bounce 80 stems, whenever I do that, there's a 0% chance I'm going to read anything that happens after that. As soon as I put the stems back in to start the mixing process, I'm going to solo each stem individually, find out what frequency they're best suited for, and I'm going to isolate that frequency, and that's the only time they're going to get to shine. Unless there's like situations like the high pluck happening, they're all locked in to a set frequency that they're going to operate in, and I can only do that if I'm just ignoring the intent of what their name is. I name things like my after my friend Gabe. Like he's named in probably like 6 tracks. Alana synths are named after my friend Alana Pierce, and she did a DJ mix that was really, really inspiring to me. And so I just made a bunch of synths that reminded me of what she mixed. And I was like, okay, I don't know what they are, but I know the idea of what these are. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm just going to put some like loose explanation of what they are or the sound that they make. Like sometimes I just put like for for like, okay, it sounds like the slow-mo sound whenever you listen to a movie. Like, yeah.
So you mentioned different frequencies. I guess you mean frequency ranges, like
Yes.
bass, lows. How granular are you with that?
I try to mix these at a semi-reasonable rate. This song took me about 4 days to mix. For most of the time, when I'm trying to isolate these things, for the parts that are really dynamic, like the high pluck, like this, I'll have 2 different tracks completely. One for this intent and then one for this one. And the EQ will just completely change.
Okay.
Even though they're the same sound, they're coming across as different intents, and I didn't want to make another track for it. I didn't want to make another track in the MIDI section for it, I should say.
Okay.
So whenever it comes to mixing, I will try to pretty much, I'll have like this is probably not to my credit, but I'll have 3 EQs running on one stem. Like I'll have the Reaper EQ, I'll have a Waves EQ, and I'll have an Isotope EQ. So that like whenever I have the master EQ running, I don't see anything that I didn't regulate to happen. That might be ridiculous and overkill, but for me, it's just I don't want there to be bleed over because every frequency is a bit of bandwidth that could be going to something that has the intent that I want. Yeah, that's what I was meaning by textures a lot of times, because the textures are everything when it comes to music like this. And if I'm not very direct and very like precise about what gets through, then I'm letting noise get through compared to the rest of the song. There's a time and a place for noise, but this isn't it.
I think something we haven't talked about yet is the drums.
Oh, sure.
I noticed that you like to just drop in samples on the arrange view
Yeah.
rather than using a sampler or some other means.
Yeah.
Any explanation for that?
I made a bunch of music this year. And a lot of the albums that I made this year focused on percussion because it was something I was bad at. If you look at my older work, namely Souls and Blood, I didn't put a lot of drums in there, and that was intentional. I didn't feel like my drum writing was anywhere near the rest of my writing. And instead of trying to like hold myself back to learn how to write drums in a way that felt at least like in the same ballpark, I was like, I'm just going to write, and I'm going to make it so big that no one's going to notice the lack of drums or the scarcity of the drum. This year, because I've had a lot that I wanted to get out, I try to incorporate like, okay, how can I make this drum forward? So I made like Omen, which was a really Scandinavian Viking death orchestra album. And it was completely percussion forward. And it made me find a way to make interesting drums. If you isolate your weakness to be the only thing that's forward on the album, then you have to either like put up or shut up when it comes to that album. You're either going to get better or the album's never going to get out or people are just aren't going to like it. And that was my entire viewpoint. Just I'm going to make stuff that I have to improve on to be able to make it the quality that I was hoping for. And then with this, I just dropped in samples, and whenever I was in the mixing process, I found new samples for a lot of it, especially the kicks. I completely replaced the kicks that were in the album. Like this one, it's not where it should be. And so whenever you go over to the stems, another 5 or 6 tracks that are layered there just with new samples added on to give it a little bit more beef, give the snare a little bit higher impact with a bigger reverb tail. I think that the hi-hat stayed the same. This one right here, I really like that hi-hat. It needed some taming during the mixing process, though. The person that mastered it kind of, he was walking me through the process of mastering for electronic music, and a lot of it is a accentuation of the low end for making the bass and the drums feel really strong, but also making sure the cymbals are nice and crisp. And it was a new process for me because during that time, the cymbals were always way, 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 way too loud. So we had to go back through and redo a lot of the cymbal levels and layering. So I knew that was a risk way early on. So I didn't want to like fall in love with one particular sound until we were at that point where it was needed. Everyone that makes electronic music is probably disagreeing with me right now, and that's fine. That's totally fine.
I know that you could have a song idea, you go to find the kick drum, and you spend the next hour finding the kick drum,
Man.
and you have no notes written on in the arrangement.
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from with that as well. You just throw something in, get the beat down, and then, I mean, obviously, saving it for mixing or fixing it in the mix is not ideal either.
It's not ideal at all. But it's like I have over 1,000 kick drums. Like, who has time to look through 1,000 kick drums? No one. Not a single person.
Yeah.
If you have time to like rifle through 1,000 kick drums, email me. You're now my assistant. Like I don't have that kind of time. Like, so let's talk, because I want to know what you're like, how you're able to do that. Like most of the time, whenever I have my temp drums in that are kind of like, they're like a 6 out of 10, and that's being generous. And I'm like, okay, okay, cool, I'm done. Let's go to Splice and let's find drums that aren't temp drums anymore and start making the layers for the drums.
So is Splice a service that you like for finding drum sounds? And
For drums, absolutely yes. For literally anything else, I don't use it.
I actually haven't used it at all. Any tips for that?
I had a bunch of reference music. I'm very, very detailed with reference music for how I want certain details of an album and even like micro details for like tracks to sound. So I had an idea of the artist, the style, like, and everything like that. And often I would just search the artist or search the genre for those particular drums sounds. And I would go through and just like listen to what I'm looking for. So like, okay, like isolate the kick, only use one shots. Let's go. And I would listen through all those really quick. For instance, I reference Perturbator in like 3 tracks because his drums are so tight and I love them. I found a couple that matched the style of drums that I was looking for, and I just started making the layers off of that. So by searching like the particular artist you're looking for, you can kind of find the area. You're like in the right neighborhood. But then you just have to do a little bit more legwork to find what parts of the drums that you're looking for. But yeah, Splice I have used for every track for the drums.
So they actually organize it sort of by sound alike per artist sort of thing?
Yeah, they're not always 100% artist to artist, but you can find like the genre. Like I searched Perturbator. Another artist that I really love, her name, she goes by Whipped Cream, and she has her own splice pack, and it is like the drums are so good. Oh my god! I used her kick drum on everything. Uh,
Maybe we can put a link in there
yeah, for sure.
as your favorite drum pack. Okay.
Yeah.
So Mark, how did you get into using Reaper? Like why use Reaper for electronic music production anyways?
I was already making a lot of other music with Reaper. As you know, I use it for everything else, and like I get that a lot of other people use Ableton and like Fruity Loops. I've used Fruity Loops. I started making music in Fruity Loops. I knew Pro Tools, but I didn't like it. I knew Cubase, and it was okay. It's probably my second favorite DAW. But whenever I started playing around with Reaper, I was like, oh, I get this. This is all audio artist forward. It's kind of like you know what you're doing very upfront, low learning curve at first, but like high mastery curve, I would say.
Sure.
And that's really what attracted me to Reaper in the first place. When it comes to electronics, no one really used it because it's not a performance focused DAW. Because like Ableton is meant to be played live. That's why it's called Ableton Live.
Yeah.
And so I know that this will be performed live, but that's not going to change the way I write it. So why would I drastically change the way I compose just for the intent of it being performed? That's this ridiculous kind of mentality of, oh, because someone is going to see this painting, I'm going to change the way that this painting is being created. That doesn't make sense to me.
I think another complaint is that the stock plugins don't really there's not a lot of variety of sounds. It definitely doesn't cover all genres, but it's just really basic things like resynth is kind of like just the oscillator section of a modular synth.
Sure.
And if people don't realize that the sampler is pretty basic. It's, one track per plugin. Compared to the other ones, the stock plugins are lacking. They're not very creative tools. 90% of people that use Cubase, Logic, or anything else also have Native Instruments plugins.
Sure.
They'll have Contact, they'll have all kinds of different free synths and everything like that. So they're mostly using their favorite sounds anyways.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I'm using Reaper with all of my favorite synths, but there's still like, I use VOPM, for God's sakes. There's maybe like 5 people on the planet that know what this synth is, I think. And it's literally just like a really small sine wave editor. It's an FM synth.
Where's that? I don't think I've seen that one before.
So it's in a different song. I was searching to see if it's in this
Okay.
one, but it's not in this song. But it's like it is something that I use all the time, and it was really important to me because it has this really gentle sound that I really loved. And here I will throw it up.
Oh, that's ugly.
I know. It's so ugly, but I love it.
Sounds
So
cool though.
yeah, like it's not a pretty synth. It's not nice to look at. It's not going to win any awards for like interface of the year. But like I can start it up and I can adjust two things and it worked exactly the way I wanted it to for a layer in a lot of songs. Like the entire Tonight Is Ours track is led by this and one sound in Massive, and that's the entire melody.
I've tried to get a sort of bell sound like that out of Resynth, and it just ends up sounding nasty. So
Yeah,
that's one to look for, guys.
like everyone has like their go-to things that are like weird and very much so personally them, and that's definitely my favorite thing in my arsenal of weird reference synths. And I think that like whenever you're going through stuff, it makes sense that like people look at Reaper and they're like, oh, all the stock plugins aren't where they should be. Like, who cares? If you already have plugins that you like, then okay, your argument is gone because I have all these plugins. Why would I not use them with the most efficient DAW that I'm familiar with? That's
I
kind
mean,
of
how many
horrifying.
people are buying plugins on Black Friday? Really? Like,
Oh God.
people are spending hundreds of dollars on cheap plugins today. We're recording this on Friday, on Black Friday. I haven't managed to buy anything, so I'm feeling good. But yeah, how much did you spend today?
Um, oof,
The whole Thanksgiving thing and then Black Friday just makes no sense to me.
absolutely
I mean,
not.
in Canada, we have Thanksgiving and it's like a Sunday and a Monday, like a nice dinner and a day
Mhm.
off. And we don't have Black Friday. Well, we do have Black Friday, but it's today. It's your Black Friday. Like Thanksgiving is taking a moment to be thankful for everything you have, your health, your possessions, your family. The entire time you're lusting for cheap electronics,
Yeah,
and it
for
makes
sure.
no sense. And you're gonna go out there and fight people at Walmart and stuff. It makes no sense to me at all. All right. Well, we got off topic.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's probably a good place to end, anyways.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for showing this project to us.
yeah.
Lots of cool tips and ideas in this project. If you guys are interested in Mark's music, you can find him on Spotify and iTunes and on YouTube. You can find him on Twitter at Marc Straight. All
Uh,
right.
yeah, and another thing I did want to mention, I am going to be doing bigger breakdowns of most of my albums from this year and Souls and Blood as well. I will be taking suggestions of what particular parts you want to see. So if you do like this video and you want to kind of get more information about a particular area, maybe it's like texturing, maybe it's the compositional process of different electronic music styles, that's totally fine. Just let us know in the comments, and I can try to focus on that when I do mine. And I'll be starting to do the recordings of those in late December, early January.
Awesome. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can subscribe to Mark's channel as well. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon. And visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.